Thanks for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here to share my recent research. So today my talk will be on AI in the battle against falsehood. So first I'll begin with a few words about my research in general. So as Yin already introduced, I'm at the University of Pittsburgh, and at the UPIT, I direct the Pixel Lab, paid Computational Social Dynamic Lab. And our lab focuses on computational social science in the intersection among technology, democracy, and society. So our work specialized using text and network data, especially LLM, LSM. So I call it large language models and large social media data set. We use these to try to understand human social and political behaviors. So my day-to-day job is to think about networks and narrative and their interplay and the influence on people and the society at large. The objective of our work is to promote accountability and integrity in the digital social information ecosystem. And so this has driven our work in two primary areas. One is to build ethical, accountable AI and the interpretable decision support system. And another stream of our work is cybersocial influence. So we try to study how information flow influence people and society. And beyond my faculty role, I'm currently a director at the Peace Cyber Institute for Cyber Law Policy and Security. So this institute try to support and foster the cyber research ongoing at the university. So we support research that asks critical questions about networks, data, and algorithms, and try to bridge this ever-changing gap among law policy and technology. So here I'm trying to give you some highlights of our recent work. So we study networks and behaviors, and our work feature in understanding the link between online attention and the offline behaviors. For example, we ask questions such that like which communities have the competitive advantage in winning online attention, and how does the online resonance escalate or diminish the offline conflicts. And during the COVID pandemic, we try to study the influence of online misinformation, and we address questions like what content is more influential, and what kind of people is more susceptible to online misinformation. So while there are a variety of aspects in my research, today's talk will be focused on AI and information integrity challenges. So I'm going to cover three parts: AI in measuring, AI in detecting, and AI in the loop. So the first part, AI in measuring, I will talk about how we measure the impact of harmful information. So here in the first part, I'm going to talk about how we leverage AI and causal machine learning to try to understand the impact of harmful political information. So this part will dive into political discourse and attention economy. So why should we care? Online discourse, online political discourse, and online attention. So we know that social media allows these opinion leaders to amplify their message to their audience by posting their political views, their opinions to their followers, their audience. And politicians, they typically have larger audience base than ordinary people. And the social media just allows these politicians to shape public opinion and political discourse online. And the influence is not only limited online, right? This influence can change policy making, policy shifting, also the election, and all kinds of other democratic processes. These politicians, their posts sometimes carry false and misleading information. So, for example, after the 2020 2020 U.S. presidential election, after that, some politicians continuously posting about election fraud, which mostly are unfounded claims. And before the January 6th Capitol attack, more and more misinformation was posted by these politicians. And these unfounded claims are harmful because it changes people's perception about the election integrity. And many of the posts harness lots of engagement interactions. So these social medias allow politicians to directly engage with their constituents, with their followers, with their audience, without any quality control mechanism. And of course, the mainstream media could closely looking at these major politicians. However, the local political leaders, for example, state legislators, they receive less media scrutiny than the national politicians like the congressmen. And this increases the likelihood of harmful content circulation. And the visibility on these platforms can easily translate to political influence and agenda setting powers to change the policy, to change the government operations. So that's why in this study we try to really focus on the local political leaders across the US. And we focus on misinformation and incivility. So why do we focus on this? Research have shown that misinformation spreads faster, nearly 6 times faster than actual contents. And this uncivil rhetoric that triggers fears, outrage, and angers. This rhetoric attracts more engagement than civil discourse. And there has been well documented that commercial platforms, they prioritize engagement for corporate benefit, for corporate profits, not truth. So in this study we ask, could this misinformation and incivility explain the increased visibility for some politicians? So the study used a large longitudinal social media data set that we collected from Twitter, now X, and Facebook. So it covers over 6,500 state legislators, over 4 million tweets, and nearly 500,000 Facebook. It covers a complete digital trace within the 2 years, 2020 and 2021, which covers a very critical time in the US history. It covers events like COVID-19, elections, and political unrest. So we derive key metrics based on engagement, likes, shares, retweets, replies of a post, and posting frequency and posting contents and network influence. Like we use network analysis to measure this network influence. And we measure visibility and harmful content based on the posting content and the engagement. So visibility captures the total engagement per post that outperforms the expected engagement. And low credibility is defined when the post covers any, includes any unreliable URLs. Uncivil content is detected using AI tools like Detoxify, large language models, or Google Perspective AI. All right, so here, visibility is quantified based on attention and engagement, but of course it doesn't mean approval. All right, so the interesting question. So we want to understand harmful content, the relationship between harmful content and visibility gains and losses. But just because there's a correlation between harmful content and the visibility change doesn't mean that visibility change is driven by the harmful content. There could be other confounding factors, like posting frequency, right? So more active politicians usually have higher visibility. Audience size matters, right? More followers, higher visibility. And there are systematic differences across parties, across personal traits. So to address this, we use causal machine learning to try to isolate these confounding factors. So we train the causal deep learning to control for contextual similarity, including temporal similarity, topical similarity, partisan, and the personal traits. And we further use matching technique to isolate these confounding factors. So overall, this helps us to identify to what extent the visibility gains and losses can be attributed to posting harmful content. All right, so this showcases how we isolate the complex confounding factors. So we train, fine-tune deep learning model called DragonNet. And this model will produce content embedding that isolate the confounding factors like partisan topical factors. So in a standard embedding space, like a topical embedding space, you will easily see these uncivil language and civil language and the partisan topics. They cluster together and in different topical space, right? So this suggests that they are heavily correlated. And we will want to decorrelate this space, this relationship. So this deep learning allows us to deconfounding it. So after the deconfounding step, you can see now the correlation disappear. Now, if you want to test whether incivility is a driver for visibility, then you see incivility now becoming more balanced across the partisan topical groups. So what does the study tell us? Who gets more visibility? Which party do you think gets more attention on social media? Democrats or Republicans? So this will test your sensitivity of about online political discourse. So we found that visibility differs significantly based on party, gender, personal trait, posting frequency. In general, we found that Republican men have a higher visibility on Facebook, and then Democrat and women have a higher visibility on Twitter. So this is a general trend, and the general trend holds when we control for other confounding factors. And I saw there's a question here.
Yes, what years is this? Is this before Twitter became X?
Yes, exactly. This is based on 2020 and 2021. At that time, Twitter has a more stronger moderation policy. All right, so does misinformation plays a role? So we found that for Republican, it's positive. For Democrat, it's negative. So low credibility has a positive effect on visibility for Republican on both platforms, but negative effect on for Democrat on Facebook. So this could probably be explained by how the politicians interact with their audience, their constituency, and how the audience expect and trusted these politicians. And we also interestingly found that more extreme Republican gain higher visibility when posting misinformation on Twitter. So in general, we see that posting misinformation helps Republicans gain visibility, but not Democrats. All right, so what about uncivil content? So we found that for both parties, negative. So both Democrats and Republicans receive lower engagement on posts containing uncivil languages. And we further found that more extreme politicians had greater penalties for posting uncivil content. So incivility reduced engagement, especially for extreme politicians. So to summarize this first study, this shows the first large-scale empirical finding about political attention economy. And the study shows that posting uncivil content on Twitter hurt politicians' visibility, especially for the extreme politicians. And this engagement with misinformation is asymmetric across platforms. Spreading low credibility information attracts greater attention from both platforms for Republicans, not for Democrats. So this is interesting because we know that politicians may have a different communication strategy on different platforms. But the question is, for the same harmful behavior from the same set of people, why do the penalties differ? So this leads to a very important implication about the platform and AI's role in tackling misinformation and disinformation, right? So we know now these platforms, they use AI machine learning to boost engagement. At the same time, they use this AI machine learning to counter misinformation, disinformation trends. However, this AI-driven algorithm may accidentally boost this falsehood because of this engagement-based ranking. So now, I'm going to move to the second part, AI in detecting. So in this part, I'm going to talk about how we leverage and test the AI for detecting misinformation and conspiratory narratives. So I'm going to begin with conspiratorial narratives, and then I will move to misinformation in general. All right, so in the subsequent slides, I'm going to show some examples about conspiracy theories, but this is just for illustration, of course, not for endorsement. All right, so why should we care? Online conspiracy theories, or CTs. So we know that in recent years, especially after the pandemic, there have been lots of CTs circulating online, including the human-made coronavirus, the anti-vax, and white replacement, hidden government control. And all these have been spreading widely and rapidly online it influences people's decision in a variety of areas, public health, democracy, and affecting the social trust. So until very recently, the study of conspiracy theory still rely on the text collecting from the CT-related forum, online forums. And these CT-related forums, the content are not always conspiratorial, right? So for example, if you look at this post, this is a post from a subreddit. This we consider as a CT and should be carefully moderated before it leads to bigger harms. How about this? It's definitely not a CT, not a conspiracy theory, because it's a question about conspiracy. And how about this? This is also not a CT, it's an opinion, may or may not related to conspiracy theory. So we know opinions are different from CT claims, right? And in these CT forums, many users debunk rather than promote CTs. And the existing CT detection technique overly rely on simple parsings. For example, the forum's names or simple keyword matching. For example, these words, conspiracy, can be keywords be considered as conspiracy theory, right? And the word like censorship. So censorship is frequently appear keywords in long establishing CT that says government secretly watching people, monitoring people's. So it's frequent keywords in established CTs. So in this work, we try to ask and try to understand how can we systematically identify both established and engage conspiracy theories that are topical independent, like unrelated to any topics. So we propose a general classification scheme. So we first synthesize all social theories about conspiracy theory. And then we propose this working definition that defines a CT is a set of narratives designated to accuse an agent. The agents could be individuals, groups, or organizations. And accuse these agents committing a specific actions, which is believed to be working toward a secretive or malevolent objective or secret plot. And plus, there needs to be evidence of agreement and support from the author. So based on these criteria, a CT will be recognized when there's an agent. In this case, government was implicitly mentioned, and there needs to be an action, in this case, creating Obamacare, and there needs to be a secret plot. So here, for child trafficking, and also the author's stance. So our goal is to develop a nuanced CT classifiers that consider author's stance and narrative complexity. So the study used over 1 million posts from CT-related subreddit, and then we build this human label ground truth that based on our new classification schemes. And we test all kinds of machine learning, deep learning approach, and including the generative AI and testing generative AI. So the novelty of this study is it's a topic-independent classification. Unlike the previous research, we incorporate the explicit and implicit CT signals. And we propose a theory-based prompting strategy for generative AI. So then how does the study tell us? So overall, our supervised learning approach work well, and the generative AI slightly outperform the supervised model, but not much. So I'm going to skip all these details. There's no significant difference between supervised AI and generative model. So we use the best performing supervised learning approach on the most active CT forums. We try to understand how prevalent are these actual CTs in these CT forums. So we found that there's only slightly over 30% positive ratio, which means that over 2/3 of the content in these conspiracy-related forums, they are false positive. They are not actual CTs. So why does the discrepancy matters? Because when we were able to distinguish CT and non-CT in these CT forums, then we can isolate their impact. We can look at their engagement, the engagement to these CT and non-CT posts more carefully, right? So we found that this CT content receive significantly more comments and higher comma score, meaning that they attract more attention and they are more appreciated by the audience. So the existing research has significantly underestimate CT's actual impact. Now, beyond these models, these analysis, we now look at generative AI, since sometimes they bring us closer to understand CT narrative, right? For example, generative AI is very good in understanding the rhetorical questions. But in other cases, they fail to understand complex, other types of complex narratives, including criticism, sarcasm, and they cannot distinguish hallucination. For example, in this post, the author criticized the coronavirus death numbers. So AI consider this as a CT, and it goes on to explain there is a deliberate effort to manipulate the death figure, which is a common theme in conspiracy theories. Another example, right? This author tried to use sarcasm to ask for proof that coronavirus is fake. So the AI, again, consider it's a CT and go on to explain there may be a hidden agenda behind the pandemic, which is a common theme in conspiracy theories. So you can see where these come from, right? So we found that there are consistent patterns like this. AI struggle to understand conspiracy narrative, which make them very limited in understand the disinformation broadly. All right, so then we try to understand how AI detect misinformation in general and assess the information credibility. All right, so we know these AI models, right? The GPT-4 and newer models now is being used for misinformation detection. But the question is, how well do they work, right? And prior study mostly focused on AI's credibility rating, like how well can they build the prior model to understand the misinformation, but not on the underlying reasoning flows. So in this work, we try to systematically evaluate how well generative AI model assess credibility and whether the reasoning align with human fact checkers. All right, so we build ground truth data set with human fact checkers, and we evaluate different generative model And we compare their accuracy and how they agree with the human fact checkers. So the interesting thing in this study is that we identify distinct reasoning categories, including content quality, language objective, and legislative behaviors. And we test the AI in a more practical setting, because in a practical setting, in a real world, often the AI has to determine the credibility based on article snippets and summaries. So overall, we want to ask, does generative AI work or work well? And if so, can it work in practical setting? If not, how does it fail? All right, so the study findings. Does generative AI work? And we found overall GPT performs better than others, but Gemma 2 is a strong open source alternative. Other models like Llama, they have lower accuracy, and the agreement with human fact checkers was moderate to low. And for working on the summarized task, there's some promise, but it's not that reliable, so it's not ready to be used in general. All right, so how does it fail? When generative AI fails, how does it fail? So we identify 3 distinct categories. The first one is content quality. So we found that AI overly rely on hard criteria, like the linguistic styles, the formality of the languages, rather than the actual fact verification. Language objectivity. So AI struggle with detecting misinformation when the content use natural language to use natural language, but it might includes misleading framing of selective details. For example, these articles state that Dr. Fauci's comments on wearing mask, and AI gives incorrect rating because of this misleading framing in the title. And another category, another reasoning is that AI frequently over-relying on the reputation, presumed reputation, the domain reputation or the reputation of the politician, which are likely to lead to false positive for the reputable, for the unreliable resources posting reliable content, and false negative when the reputable sources posting misleading content. All right, so to summarize this part of 2 works, we found that generative AI has some promise but cannot fully replace human fact checkers due to their inconsistent reasoning and susceptibility to misleading frames. And AI often over-rely on the surface level patterns instead of actual fact-checking. And there's a very limited capacity in this high-stake content moderation. So here we argue a hybrid AI-human approach. And we argue that this approach are necessary to improve the scalability and accuracy for misinformation moderation. All right, so in the last part, I'm going to talk about how we collaborate with NGOs to deploy AI assistant tools for election integrity and to fight against falsehood. All right, so during the 2024 presidential election, I've been collaborating with nonprofit newsrooms in Pennsylvania. So this organization, they build this election chatbot to help citizens fact check the election knowledge and to fight with election misinformation and disinformation. But this chatbot, because it's a generative AI itself, can produce harmful and misleading information. So we want to safeguard this AI election chatbot from producing this kind of risky, harmful information. So we assemble the interdisciplinary red teaming exercise. So this red teaming bring together researchers in AI, in disinformation, in election policy, in the election integrity, and also linguistic and multicultural researchers. So we use simulations, like simulate all kinds of persona, asking all kinds of different questions, simulate citizens' questions to assess the chatbot's risk for hallucination, disinformation biases, and there are translation issues because the chatbot is deployed in multilingual populations. All right, so this chatbot has been successfully deployed in 2024, and it will be deployed more broadly in upcoming elections. And I've also been collaborated with NGOs in Taiwan. So we've been studying the propaganda, the spread of propaganda during Taiwan's presidential election. And based on our study and others' study, one trend is pretty clear. That's that disinformation, election disinformation now has increasingly and becoming more and more AI generated. So, for example, during the 2024 presidential election, there are lots of online videos featuring these virtual anchors reading scripts and have this synthesized voiceover. And we found there are lots of these videos have different virtual anchors reading the different parts of the same fake stories about the former President Tsai. So these kind of videos apparently were created by this free online video editor called CapCut. You probably know these tools, and you probably use these tools. This tool is created under ByteDance, the owner of TikTok, right? So a tool like this CapCut makes creating convincing videos more accessible to anyone, to everyone, right? So now AI can be readily used to reinforce falsehood. How can we defend against it? The challenges of fact-checking are twofold. On the AI side, we know AI-driven fact-checking systems are prone to making hard judgment, binary judgments, making the classification without contextual understanding. And there might be algorithmic biases that favor certain narratives, right? And they lack ability to access these complex and evolving narratives. On the human side, human fact-checking is very labor and expert-intensive work. Fact-checking requires rigorous analytical training involving source evaluation, contextual understanding, and ethical consideration. So a fact-checker needs to know how to do source verification, cross-referencing, multimedia forensic, and they have to know, train to know a variety of debunking and disinformation tactics. So organizations like IFCN, they have been training journalists and researchers with these rigorous skills in source verification and source analysis. So a fact checker has the skills, lots of skills that overlap with a journalist. And these organizations across the globe also have established a global standard for transparency, methodology, and accountability in this fact-checking process to ensure fact-checking is unbiased, impartial. So because of this unique high standard of fact-checking, the platform used to collaborate with fact-checking experts and organizations to do content moderation. So you probably guess what I'm going to say. Unfortunately, there's a recent shift in platform moderation. So X, formerly Twitter, has a big shift under new ownership, right? So after Elon Musk took over in 2022, Twitter now has a big shift. They shift from their centralized model to a more strong moderation policy to a decentralized and volunteer-based moderation, right? They embrace community nodes and they rule out the misinformation warning labels and they reinstate the formerly banned Twitter accounts. In Meta, that's a different story. So they increasingly using AI to replace the human-heavy fact-checking processes. And now in 2025, this January, Zuckerberg announced that they had stopped the human fact-checking program entirely. So there has been lots of media reporting on the impact of this. So this footage by John Oliver, he did a very rigorous investigation on this and make a very valuable footage that talk about this platform policy shift and also the relationship with free speech. And those NGOs and medias, they now were very concerned about more hatred and misinformation would appear in the name of free speech. So what can we do? Right now, I'm working with NGOs to promote a human-AI collaborative approach because we were deeply concerned about AI's capacity and the lack of human fact-checking. So what we propose is AI in the loop fact-checking workflow. It's not human in the loop, as most of you may have heard. When you say human in the loop means that human help AI correct the mistake, and AI is there to do their job. But AI in the loop means that AI is the assistant to human. Human is the decision maker, and AI help human to do the job, right? So we demonstrate this approach by building a dashboard to the fact checkers. So the dashboard could automatically collect the information and to summarize and to take suspicious narratives and to prioritize based on the factors like virality, societal harms, and strategic importance. And you could automatically recognize the repeated narratives. So all these are AI good to do, right? Good at doing. But then decision maker is human. And we have deployed this, we have testing this in the fact-checking community. And these tools have shown significant efficiency improvement, especially in recognizing the repetitive misinformation circulation. And right now, these tools has been deployed to one of the major fact-checking organizations in Taiwan, and we continuously refine the tool using user feedback. Okay, so this is my takeaway. So in the fight against falsehood, that fight is an asymmetric warfare. The malintent users, they now can easily use AI to create falsehood and to reinforce falsehood. And we, as researchers and publics, we want to use AI to defend against it. But we know that AI alone is not enough. And I have been very interested in this question. What's the weakest spot of AI? And one of which that I argue is this epistemic vigilance. So it's a cognitive theory proposed in 2010. It's a cognitive mechanism that we build from our childhood. So it helps us to evaluate the reliability, plausibility, and trustworthiness of the information we receive from others. It tells us what information is true, what information is not. And so what does it do? It helps us evaluate whether the source is credible, whether the content aligns with existing knowledge, and whether the intention behind the source is trustworthy. So the current AI, the power lies in large human data, right? And it learned to understand the pattern with predictability and randomness, but it lacks all of these capacity, reliability, plausibility, trustworthiness. It cannot distinguish any of these. And beyond this internal lack of capacity, there's also external influence, right? For example, there's incomplete signals in the input. In all the data we use to train AI, like a large language corpus, large textual corpus, there's no intention or other signals that help people learn epistemic vigilance. And there's very little incentive for commercial platforms to strengthen information integrity compared to engagement maximization, which is more profitable. There's very little incentive for them to fight against falsehood. And sadly, the academia funding, because of the federal funding shift, academia's incentive almost falls in the same, very similar tracks as the commercial world. All right, so I think this is where we are. Both AI and the public do not have sufficient epistemic vigilance to fight against the falsehood. And how can we gear AI and people's vigilance to counter falsehood? So as you aspire to be a data scientist or have a career in AI, I'm looking forward to exploring all these possibilities with all of you. So that's my talk, and thank you for your listening, and happy to take any questions.
We'll open the floor for a few quick questions.
Okay.
When you look at the information, misinformation, do you classify, is it a state actor, is it a local, like source of the misinformation pattern?
Yes, when we look at when we look at the misinformation, those are politicians. So we do have their longitudinal digital traces for us too. And I think these are very interesting population that we can look into their long-term behaviors.
So sometimes, like in a situation, sometimes in a real-time scenario, so some false information, like let's suppose some riots going on, so that time some sensitive content is spread in that area. So how can we use the AI to tackle that sensitive content to not to show to the people or to decentralize it, so in a real time. Decentralize to reduce the visibility of that content.
So you are talking about this media appear in platform, in platform like a social media platform.
Social media platforms, or maybe some social media WhatsApp groups.
So I think the solution comes in many paths, right? So if you are talking about platform policy, there's always a way that because the platform promote the video, the way they promote it is maximize the engagement, and the way they can demote it is to minimize the engagement. So if that is your question, in real time, there's a way to make the engagement lower, right, as it propagates through the social media. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if I answered your question correctly.
Sometimes the content can incite a violence and we need to reduce the visibility. So how do we decentralize the content? So that's what I just thought.
Oh, you mean in terms of detecting the detection in the real time? I think that's a very interesting detection questions. That the detecting the synthesized image and videos are different from detecting the language. These are kind of a different scenario, and that's beyond my research. Yeah.
I have a simple question. Thank you for the talk, by the way. So there's a clear incentive in spreading misinformation because it leads to user engagement. Do you work on, or is your research concerned with driving incentives and spreading facts, or creating a platform that does the opposite of, what current platforms are?
You mean?
So, does your research also concern with, supporting AI and the public and driving incentives behind, spreading the right information and making it accessible? Just want your thoughts.
That's a very interesting question. Yes, I have a separate project that we try to build AI help these politicians, these officers try to reach out to their constituency. So the weapon to fight, or maybe the shield to fight against harmful discourse is to use a more healthy discourse. So we believe the political officers, for these government officers, their job is to understand their constituency and explain what they do in the policy making. So in my another project, we do use AI and to help them to get more engaging with their constituency.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for the talk. How can we detect how can we detect and correct biases in AI when those same biases are deeply ingrained in the society and in media as well? And if we use human fact checker, as you said, using collaboration, how can first I wanted to ask if we can use human fact checkers, can there be biases there as well in the human fact checkers? And how do we tackle those?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So here, when I say human fact checking, it's a very rigorous process. It's how do you become a accountable journalist? How do you become a accountable fact checker? It needs to be when you say something is not factual, something is factual, you need to show those source. You need to verify the source. So there's a rigorous process for you to show the accountability, right? Everything, every step there's evidence to show that. So for AI currently, because the source is everywhere, they would not know or would not tell where the sources come from. So that's a kind of fundamental flaw. When they gather this source, try to understand how to speak fluently as human, there's no these sources, and so there's no this source verification built up in the AI. So that's the fundamental flaw. And to examine whether they have this bias is to learn from what fact checker, those global standard. So if we go back to look at the standard, we will have a way to hold this AI fact checker. If we want to build an AI that is capable of doing human things, then we will have used the same criteria to check that. And unfortunately, the benchmark that we compare AI, right? For example, now people suddenly feel like a DeepSeek R1 has the great performance. But the benchmark, they say which AI model is better than another's. There's the benchmark. Fact checking is out of the question. There's no such criteria in how we evaluate AI.
I thank you for your work, which is urgent and timely. So my question has to do with the potential opportunities of a different attack, which would be rather than debunking, pre-banking, following the work that is being done in some Scandinavian countries, for instance, to educate the public, starting with early childhood education, to recognize patterns of disinformation. Does that show promise in your mind?
I think so. I think one of the things I kind of intrigued by this epistemic vigilance. I think what we lack in our education is to build up this vigilance. And vigilance, of course, including understand the tactic of how these stories were framed, but also include strengthen our ability to understand the narrative fidelity. We try to understand how the narrative, the details making sense.